Welcome to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Saravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com. Delivered by DoorDash.
Welcome to episode 78, the Pierre-Edouard Bellemare episode of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor. We welcome in Frank Saravalli from Daily Faceoff. Frank, how are you? How was your weekend?
It was busy. A little night out with Mike McKenna on Saturday night. He was in Philly for the Warriors Classic tournament held at the Flyers practice facility. They had teams from around the country, almost every NHL city represented for military veterans, disabled military veterans to play hockey. An awesome way to see hockey heals. And Mike was out here coaching one of the teams from St. Louis. So exciting to catch up with him in person, get a dinner and get a few drinks. So it was great.
How's his groins feeling after playing goal for the first time?
He was a little sore, to be expected, I guess, but he loved being back on the ice and being out with the guys at Blues practice last Sunday, filling in, and just an exciting, time for him in general. When your kids are little and you play pro hockey, I'd imagine, they don't remember a lot, but for your daughter to be there with the kids on her team, to see your dad play in an NHL jersey, even in practice, is probably pretty exciting.
Oh, yeah, I would think so. And, well, let's start there. Pretty exciting, I would think, as we talk goaltendings for Marc-Andre Fleury and everybody in Chicago. They make the coaching change that seemed to me inevitable. The Blackhawks, I know it's only one game and there's always that bounce back, Frank, but before this pod started, you told me the Blackhawks against Nashville, that's the lowest shot totals they've had in a year and a half. And I watched that game and I was told that the Hawks, their mere defense was terrible to play, right? You keep the offensive guy between you and the net. You don't really attack, and the players didn't really like it. Well, obviously under Derek King, that changed last night, and it's early, but the Hawks look like a very different team without their coach.
Yeah, they do. And I wonder, is it too late? I don't know. I mean, is there a chance that they could possibly get back in the race? They've played more games than anyone else in the Central, but they're basically, 8 points back of maybe 10, if you include the games in hand, of a playoff spot in the Central. Probably a lot of ground to make up, not impossible if they get the goaltending from Marc-Andre Fleury, they button down defensively and find a way to continue to score. The scoring hasn't really been so much of a problem. 28 goals this year. There's teams ahead of them in the playoff race that are only 30, 32, 34. So it's not been the scoring, it's been the defending. To your point, a -20. They're sadly in the Green Jacket sweepstakes with the Arizona Coyotes, who historic already a -30 to start the year, and they've played one fewer game than the Hawks. So we'll keep an eye on the changes with Derek King. I mean, I think in this case, it was time for Jeremy Colliton when they made the move on Saturday. To your point, I think the response from everyone around the team after Friday night's loss was, this is just flat out unacceptable. There's a lot of things we can tolerate. That wasn't one of them. And in this case, they make the change. And, it's important to point out too, one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago when we talked about Jeremy Colliton's job security, well, at the moment in time, he had the backing of Stan Bowman as general manager. Now, of course, Kyle Davidson is the assistant, now interim, and he's a Stan Bowman disciple. And I think everyone liked Jeremy Colliton, what he brought. The hockey side, maybe not as much in terms of defensive zone play. You've been harping on that for months and months, like going back to last season in terms of something to pick at with Jeremy Colliton. Now they make the change. New guy in charge, interim GM Kyle Davidson making the call, which I think is interesting in its own right, gives you some kind of indication as to the influence that he has as he takes over this interim spot. And we'll see where it all goes.
Well, yeah, it can't be any worse defensively. You pointed to their goals against. And, with Patrick Kane, who got his 1100th career point last night, you've got an elite offensive player. They don't necessarily have two, but they have one, and that should be enough. And I wonder, Frank, a few weeks ago, we talked about, Jordan Binnington might be the starting goaltender for Canada at the Olympics. Well, Carey Price is back on the ice today with Montreal. Now you've got Chicago with the defensive system. I just wonder how suddenly maybe, over the next few months, Canada's goaltending could look back to what many of us thought it would be last May, which is Price and Fleury.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not going to be Team Canada's strength. The fact that we're at this point in the season and we're debating, less than, 60 days or so until the team roster announcements are made for Beijing. So a lot can change between now and then. It'd be nice to see Fleury back in the race, because with the start of the season, I think a lot of people had counted him out. We'll see whether those stats and numbers can rebound. And I don't think anyone woke up this season and thought, oh, Marc-Andre Fleury forgot how to play goaltender. So, we'll see how the Hawks rebound. It's going to be a really big story if they can find a way to get or claw back into the race.
Yeah, you're right. They got a long ways to go about it, but that's going to be one storyline. Now, you mentioned Arizona. They avoided breaking a franchise record, Frank. So let's look for positives. They only went undefeated winless in 11 for the second time in franchise history, but they got their first win, and we'll see
what
if they
get. What a stat that is, by the way. Scott Wedgwood, the guy in 2017-18, they claim him off waivers. Exact same juncture with the record. He comes in and gets the win. Same thing happens. Scott Wedgwood comes in and gets the win. That team we've talked about this before. That 2017-18 Arizona Coyotes team, that they finished with 70 points, which is it's bananas to think about, because they were kind of in a really ugly spot through 20. We'll see what these Coyotes look like through 20. They've got 8 games to go, but they ended up getting 30 points in 36 out of their last 62 to close the season. So, at least 1 point in half of their remaining games, which is crazy to think about.
Well, speaking of odd dates, Frank, did you know that on November 6, 2018, Derek King was promoted as the interim head coach of in Rockford when he replaced Colliton? And then on November 6th, 3 years to the day, he replaced Jeremy Colliton as the interim coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. And, King's an interesting one. Former player, longtime player, was a skilled guy, was an elite forward, but was a smart top 6 forward. And I'm curious to see, he's had some coaching experience here for the last few years in the American League. I think he has more pro experience in North America coming in as a head coach than Colliton had. And I wonder if that's going to benefit him at all.
I'd imagine it would. I mean, any kind of experience helps. My bigger question with the Hawks isn't necessarily so much the coaching situation or even their GM search that's about to begin. My question is, how does this team start trending in the right direction? What is this roster? You look for difference makers, right? You're trying to count difference makers. How many are there? You mentioned one elite forward. To get to where they want to get to, do they have to start thinking about who their trade chips are? And would Kane have to enter that conversation? Ooh. I think that, to me, is the big question of Chicago's season. I'm not stirring the pot and saying that he's out there. All I'm saying is the question probably needs to start being asked. What happens with Patrick Kane at Chicago?
Oh, Frank, if he goes out there, man, he would be highly sought after. He is such an electrifying player in this regular season and in the playoffs. And there's been no decline in Patrick Kane's game if you look at it for the most part. He has been very good. Now, they got Jones and they got McCabe, and I still think they're high on Kirby Dach, and, you got Fleury. But you're right. That's a valid question.
Who's really bringing back a big return to help jumpstart things?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, look at the return for Jack Eichel, right? You got Tuck and you got Krebs and you got a first rounder. And Jack Eichel's
I think in a lot of ways that's probably middling. There's so many circumstances compared to a healthy Patrick Kane who's still only 32.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to, if you're looking at the list, you're going, okay, they're impact players. DeBrincat, would you consider trading a Kubalik?
What about Taves?
How big is the return going to be? The cap hit is what gets in the way because he's not producing up to his number.
Yeah.
Whereas with Kane, he is, and he'd have another year left on his deal.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're thinking about it, but I think it'd be odd if that wasn't at least a conversation in their front office at some point.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one because Kane, last 5 years, only Draisaitl and McDavid have more points than him. Kane has been outstanding.
Isn't that the exact argument for making a trade?
Yeah, yeah. It would be tough though, man. It'd be tough. You're Chicago. You want to rebuild, but you're just giving up your best piece, and usually you rarely win that trade long term. So now,
I guess the question is, how long is Patrick Kane playing, and how long is he super productive?
Yeah,
because he only has one additional year left on his deal, so he's gonna need to be paid again.
What if he's Ovi?
I could see it. Like the way he plays, the way he skates, his energy. Like I could see him playing till 42, a whole another 10 years.
Yeah, like what about Ovechkin? He's got 10 goals already in 11 games. He's tied for the league. Like Leon Draisaitl, 10 goals in 10 games. He leads the NHL with 23 points. We're going to get to the McDavid goal a little bit later on and fill in the blanks. But I want to go to the Pacific, Frank, and talk about, I think, easily the surprise in the Western Conference. There's no question. Early on, the Anaheim Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks are sitting third in the Pacific. Now, I know they've played more games than other teams, but they've won half their games. They got 3 overtime loss points as well. And Troy Terry, 8 goals, 14 points. He's over a point a game player. Like you said it earlier to start the season. You said if the Anaheim Ducks were in the conversation for the playoffs, Dallas Eakins would have to be in the running for Coach of the Year. Well, here they are.
Sneaky.
Yeah, like they've been.
I got a tweet
really
from
good.
someone yesterday. It was like, hey, do you have some random fan? He's like, do you have Dallas Eakins' address? Might need to send him to Jack Adams. Last night after the game. Like, oh, I like it. Someone's listening.
Yeah. Well, give credit,
I mean, Troy
man,
Terry, it's bananas. That 11-game point streak that he's on, didn't have a point in the first game. Now has 12 games, 8 goals, 14 points. I mean, the guy's been on an absolute tear. You get some other contributions from some other young guys, like a B.O. Grew comes in last night, first NHL goal. Like this team is, I don't know what necessarily has enabled them to turn the corner here. Obviously, you mentioned the power play and how historically bad it was last season. Then they kind of, this year the power play's been working, but a lot of what you're seeing is a lot of the same or similar pieces that they had on the roster last year. So what is, aside from experience, what's enabling them to take the next step? That's the question that I'd have.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with Lindholm being healthy, Josh Manson being healthy. There's 2 of your top 4 defensemen. It's hard to just find, 2 top 4 defensemen. And I'm curious about this, Frank. The Ducks, we were like, they might trade off some guys because Lindholm's a UFA and Manson's a UFA and Rickard Rakell's a UFA. Well, what if the Ducks are in a playoff position then? Then what do?
You keep them, you roll the dice. This is your team moving forward. You got to send the message that we're establishing a winning culture. We're not just going to pluck pieces off just to do it.
Yeah. Like I think
that's the message you have to send.
Yeah, like Manson and Lindholm, I know they'd like to re-sign both of them. I've heard that the chances of Rakell coming back are probably fairly low at this point. Doesn't mean you have to trade him. Lots of teams let a guy go as a free agent. He wouldn't be the first one. He's not an elite player. He's a solid player. But I think if Manson and Lindholm get back and their team's competitive and they look around the room and they're competitive because it's a lot of young guys coming, you got Zegras and Drysdale and Troy Terry and, Max Jones is out, right, for another 4 months. So I think that possibility might entice Manson and Lindholm, who are veterans, but more like younger veterans, to want to re-sign.
What's so attractive to me about what Anaheim is doing is their cap picture. Like when you take a look at their cap, basically they're icing a roster right now that is somewhere around 56 million bucks. And that includes Silverberg on it. Who's a non-roster COVID. I mean, their highest paid forward makes 5.8. The meat of their lineup is all somewhere between entry level at 750 and like $2 million. And their defense it's not crazy overpaid either. You've got Fowler at 6'5" and Lindholm at 5'2". Lindholm also needing that new deal. Manson needs a new deal as well at 4'1". John Gibson in goal at 6'4".
Oh, steal.
That's a roster that's below the cap floor. The cap floor is 60.2. You've got Kessler chewing up space. Rakell, as you mentioned, hurt. Jones on LTIR at 1.3. You've got $2 million in dead cap for Corey Perry's buyout. Like what they're doing with their NHL roster, money-wise, like they have basically a blank canvas. And I know they're going to need to pay some of these guys. But the best part about Troy Terry's year, as he's breaking out and going from, hotshot player, prospect to star, can he get to that next level of superstar? Is that he's got another year at 145, which is unbelievable. So that team is in a really solid spot moving forward to build around, provided that these players continue to take that next step.
Yeah, 100%. So sticking in the Pacific, we see now the remnants of the Jack Eichel trade. Vegas welcomed him in on their social media in typical Vegas style. They do things very well when it comes to marketing. Now he's going to have surgery, Frank. He came out and said their whole goal is 3 months. And, you've been saying for a while that his goal was to get to the Olympics. And, I guess if we do 3 months, it's like a week before the Olympics. So there's still a chance.
That's what's going to be the tough. Like if you're Vegas and you're in that spot and Jack Eichel's ready to go, first off, I'd imagine there would need to be some kind of selection in January to even have him be part of the team.
Yeah.
And maybe in that case, they select him. And then if he's not healthy, they can, I don't know what exactly the rules are. I'd have to check on swapping him out before the tournament. Maybe that's the play if you're Team USA. Like that's a potential game breaker that you're getting in your lineup that could change the perplexion, or that's not even the right word, the perception of the tournament. Complexion is what I was trying to say. What do you do? Like if you're Vegas, you're like, we just gave all this up to get this player. Obviously the Olympics are important to him. How do we say no? But we also don't really want his first action to be, in a Team USA sweater instead of a Golden Knights sweater for the first time in, however long it's been, 10 months.
Yeah. Well, I wonder because, let's be real. There's a few of those prelim games in the Olympics that might qualify as similar talents as a preseason game, right? So maybe they look at
USA versus China is
right.
It might be 20-0 before the first period's over.
And because of the depth of your roster, you're not expecting him to play 20 minutes a night, right? He might only play 13 or 14. So maybe those are good feeling games. I wonder.
Maybe, but I think the problem is, what if he gets hurt? Like, because this is that experimental, from a hockey sense, surgery, the big question is facing contact. And maybe that is a great way to ease into it. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but it's clear to me that the reason why the Eichel camp put this pressure on Buffalo to get this, to produce a resolution, either grievance or trade by the end of last week, was exactly with this calendar and the Olympics in mind. What, like, if not, what's the difference between November 4th and January 4th? Like, they put the pressure on. It had to be for this reason, to give him that fighting outside chance. I know a lot of people have looked at it and said, not happening, long shot. Skating in 8 weeks is, it opens the door to the possibility of it. So I don't know. And by the way, got to ask you, are you surprised at all that China made the decision to stay in the Olympics?
Wow.
They're in the tough, maybe the toughest group with the US and Canada. Like, I mean, what are those games going to look like?
I think they're looking at it from an experience perspective. I also think there's a lot to go into, who's making that decision from the Chinese Federation, Frank. Like, they want to feel like, look at us, we can compete. And even though we're going to get blown out, it's still there. I think they want to be on the ice.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
They cannot compete.
No, they can't compete. Obviously not. But I think if anything, they just want to be able, there's a tendency to have a little bit of propaganda in China, Frank. So
I never heard that before. But honestly, that's exactly the reason why I'm surprised they're doing it. Yeah. It's a country with an immense amount of pride. To have your doors blown off, how does that look to the rest of the world? It's not necessarily, in China. I'm sure there's some pride. We even have an Olympic hockey team, given where the sport was in the country 10 years ago. But still, they're going to lose by 20 goals.
Oh,
they're going to get shellacked by Germany.
Yeah, there's going to be some
games.
Players who potentially set Olympic scoring records because of that game. No question about it.
Now, wouldn't just the overall game of hockey be better off if, I don't know, the next team up is Norway?
Yep.
Like, wouldn't the tournament be better off just having Norway sub in for China? All that said,
100%, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. It doesn't look great when you have those blowouts. Although, if you look at the basketball, like look at Team USA and some of their scores at the Olympics over the years, right? Like they absolutely obliterated teams. So, I guess they want the skill
but
to
here's the
showcase
difference,
itself.
though. This is the difference: is that when those tournaments were played and the host nation, which gets the automatic bid into the tournament, it's played in a sport where like that sport actually existed in the country previously.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, this is an entirely new venture. It's not the same comparison.
But the end result was still blowouts, right? So if we're talking the end result, regardless of how they got there, there's still going to be didn't US, my memory is, I thought the one year in like the night, didn't they win by like 70 points or something ridiculous? I got to go back.
There were a ton of blowouts for a long time. And then the funny thing is the US team in basketball started losing games recently to teams that they otherwise would have beaten by 50 points previously. And so there has been an immense shift. All I'm saying is that since China's the host, since they're a proud country, since they like to present things to the public eye, maybe a little bit different than they are in reality, that's why I'm surprised.
Do you think the NHL players for Canada, and specifically Canada and the US, are they going to score 20? Do you think they're going to pull off the Dogs?
At what point
like
do they let up?
At 10 or 12? Like I wonder.
Probably. They probably institute the old rule that I would with, my 8U team.
5 passes.
Make 3 or 5 passes once you cross the red line.
Yeah. Well, what's funny? We'll bring in Tyler Yaremchuk. He was telling me in his men's league game, they still implement that rule every now and then in the third period. So if they're on too big of a blowout.
What, when your team is losing, Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah. Last night, the other team's goalie didn't show up, so they had to put a skater in net, and that was the rule: is you had to make 3 passes before you found the back of the net.
There you
just
go.
to keep things a little bit interesting.
We were missing our goalie this weekend, so we had a skater in net both days, and it was not pretty for our 8U team.
Okay, so when you guys had skaters in net, like they're just in because there's no equipment, right? So you're
we have like a set of equipment at the rink that the skater wears, but still, he's never literally the first time he ever played goalie was Saturday morning in the game.
Ty, what about you? Your guys, did he have goalie equipment?
Yeah, he brought the goalie that usually plays to their team, knew he wasn't going to make it. So some other guy went and picked up his gear, and he was actually pretty good. He had a nice, we were all like, damn, this guy's a pretty good glove hand. Then in the third period, we were sitting and we're like, holy smokes, we're only up by 2 guys. We gotta pick up the pace here.
Thought you guys would be the Maple Leafs for a second.
Smelled like.
Yeah, probably.
I am not wearing someone else's gear. I don't care what the situation is. Not happening.
The other thing too, you guys were talking about China and the Olympics. From a sports betting perspective, what do they set the spread at? When it's China, Canada, 18 and a half, 17 and a half. What do you do? How do you factor in?
It's probably got to be 10.
Oh, at least.
Yeah, but where do you you got to factor in?
But when does Canada just stop skate? Is the point?
Yeah.
Obviously, China's not going to score, but at what is it at 10 goals? Do they just we're good?
And even if the spread's 10, I'm assuming at 10, Canada's still the favorite, or the U.S.
Well, yeah, it'll be whatever -10 at even money, and
buddy, big money on China is what you're saying. That might be your best odds for the tournament.
There's no way. All right, let's get into fill in the blank. It's brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash, where you can use the promo code RundownDD. Gets you 25% off and no delivery fees on your first order. That Connor McDavid goal on Friday night certainly had people talking. I want your answer to this one to just be one word, though. The goal by McDavid on Friday was blank. Jason?
Oof. One word. I will say electrifying.
The building was electric after he scored it, too. That was one of the best regular season games at Rogers Place in a while. Frank?
Ballsy. I mean,
also fair enough.
Think about the balls the size of a dump truck you need to be crossing over the blue line and staring at 4 guys, and you're like, nah, I'm good, I got this. How's that? He even mentioned it after the game. It's not typically my job to pick through 4 guys, but in this case, I saw an opening. That's insane. Who sees an opening when they're staring at 4 guys?
Imagine if he even his celebration on ice was unreal. But imagine if after the game, he even kind of cracked a smile, yeah, that was a pretty nice goal. He was so downplaying. I'm like, dude, come on. At least, Jesse Puljujärvi, I thought had the best realistic response when he said, well, I was like, I watched him. I'm wondering what he's going to do. And then I just started laughing because it was funny at how, like, what he's doing. And Puljujarvi does it. Obviously, English isn't his first language, but you could tell he was just like realistically, that's funny for an NHL player to think that you could do that, because you shouldn't be able to do that against 4 defenders and a goaltender.
That's video game stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's absolutely wild. We're about a month into the season here, so I thought we would maybe go back and we'll start by giving ourselves some credit. Then we'll poke a little bit of fun at ourselves. But let's go with this: the preseason prediction that you're the most proud of that you made, the one that you think you nailed, Jason.
well, picking the Oilers to win the Pacific. Everyone was mocking me. I was the only one who did it, so I'll go with that one.
I believe you were called a homer on a certain podcast. Frank, your answer.
But then you did remind me that this is the first time you've ever picked the Oilers.
Yeah,
so I enjoyed that. I don't know. I had so many bad ones, like so many, like Craig.
You had to have a good one though. Give us a good one first. What's one that you think you nailed?
I feel pretty good about the Jets at this point. They started 0-2-1 and they're 6-3-2. I don't know.
All right, now
they're way better.
Now it's the flip side of that. The thing you were most wrong about 1 month into the season, Frank.
One of my 32 bold predictions was that Craig Berube would be the first coach fired. Not only was it Jeremy Colliton, but the fact that the Blues started off undefeated and were one of the 5 or 4 teams that have started 5-0, the most in NHL history, and now are 7-2-1. Like, that is, I deserve to eat a shit sandwich for that.
Oh, mine's easy. It's the Blues and the Hawks. I had them out. I had the Hawks in and the Blues out. That looks terrible right now.
By the way, some guy tweeted me that over the weekend. He's like, still thinking about that time Frank picked the Blues out and the Hawks in, and I had to respond and be like, wrong guy.
That's good. That's good.
It's early though. The Hawks are coming, Frank. Dare to dream.
Oh yeah, okay.
Dare to dream.
Couple more for you guys. The Colorado Avalanche sputtering along here in the first month of the season. The Avs will finish blank in the Central.
Oh, I still think they'll finish first. Like, when you look at their team,
first,
the reason they're losing is their best players aren't playing up to their capabilities. Nathan McKinnon has 1 goal in 10 games. I don't see that happen. Now, I know he's missed 2, but in their first 10 games, he has 1 goal. Rantanen has, I think, 5 points. Cale Makar was on the ice for way too many goals against rather than goals for at 5-on-5. Like, when your best players are mainly the issue, I have no problem in believing it'll turn around. I think Colorado's a team that's like, their whole focus was playoffs, that they're just kind of like in a funk and they'll come around.
I think they finished second. I don't know why then, if I have them finishing second, that I was like first, but yes. I think they finished second. I still got Jets winning the division.
Another interesting one here. Let's go out east. The Montreal Canadiens will finish blank in the Atlantic. Someone got one right off the top?
Well, Carey Price is coming back.
Yeah.
I think they're going to finish ahead of Ottawa, and I'll say they finish 6th.
I think they finish 8th.
You really think they're going to come last?
There's something wrong with that team.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know that Carey Price is saving it.
Fair enough. There you go. That puts a wrap on another edition of Fill in the Blank, brought to you by our friends at DoorDash.
Don't sleep on the Sens.
Yeah, I know. Sens got a ways to go. They'll probably be a very good team in the second half, Frank. That's probably a very fair assessment.
We're also, like, the Sabres are regressing to the mean. They've lost 4 in a row.
Reality.
Yeah.
Which
What about the Bruins, though? No one's talking about the Bruins. I said Bruins out of the playoffs. Everyone was giving me heat. Everyone said never even considered that the Bruins wouldn't make the playoffs. That was one of my bold predictions as well. Best long shot. I think it was plus 500 for the Bruins to miss the playoffs on PointsBet. Plus 500. Loved it.
What do you make of Detroit's start?
I mean, first off, they've been really fun to watch. Lucas Raymond has been ridiculous. Tyler Bertuzzi, so long as it's in the U.S., has been their best player. I mean, they've gotten the goaltending. If you look at the start Nedeljkovic and Greiss have had, it's been pretty good. I think Lucas Raymond has been one of those guys that's given them so much energy
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they're a playoff team, but the fact that they're in the, that they've been really good and watchable is a really good sign for their future.
Yeah, I'm curious to see that. I've watched a few of their games, and you're right about Lucas Raymond, man. Electrifying play. He's really living up to a lot of the scouting reports. If you read them in depth about what the scouts
from
were
when he
saying
was
about
like
him.
15.
Yeah, like they've really, really dynamic offensive player. They thought he might need some time to mature. Well, he's obviously done that, and he looks fantastic. And I do wonder if, let's say Detroit is right on the cusp, and you miss the playoffs by 2 or 3 points because your leading scorer had to miss 9 games. Like I wonder if there'll be any, any anger amongst that organization, because he's a difference maker right now in Bertuzzi. And so when he's not in the lineup, and so that's 9 games out of 82, right? Like that's a pretty significant when it's non-injury related. You know what I mean? When it's choice related.
Yeah. Well, Scott Burnside had a great riff on this in Garbage Time the other day on the Daily Faceoff show, just basically saying, where's the leadership? Steve Yzerman is one of those guys that has been looked at as sort of the, prototypical, the model captain in the NHL. Now he's running that franchise. And why hasn't there been more talk about this? The fact that he is, Tyler Bertuzzi, the only unvaccinated player in the NHL at this point, and actively sitting out games. It's been 3 now that he's missed due to that. So it's not anything about the pay. It's the question of, what's the commitment to the rest of the team? Like if you're sitting in that room, are you looking at Bertuzzi going, this guy's not all in for the rest of us because we've all done what you don't want to do?
That's a fair question. Now, before we go, we haven't talked about the Metro, Frank, the most competitive from top to bottom. If you look at that,
Unreal.
Team in the basement right now in 8th place, and what is it, 4-3-3, I think, for 8th place. Have you seen anything from any of those teams that makes you believe for sure that they're out?
That they're out?
Yeah, like they won't be. Because it's hard to say right now. I'm not sure you can say for sure there's one that's, I still not sold yet on New Jersey, but they're right there.
Columbus has been one of the stories of the season so far. No one's really been talking about Columbus. 7-3, Brad Larson has that. We knew when we had Brad Larson on the rundown a couple months back. I think we both looked at each other after the call and the pod, and we were like, dude, I'd skate through a wall for that guy. Honest, clear, concise. You're never going to be wondering where you stand or what he'd like for you to do. And they've been really good. I mean, uniformly, everyone picked that team to finish 8th in the division. I don't know that you can say anything with any degree of certainty in the Metro. Not even who's going to, I think Carolina is going to win the division, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, I want to get a quick look ahead brought to you by ESPN Plus. They become a must-have for hockey fans. You can get access to more than 1,000 out-of-market NHL games, 75 weekly national games, plus stream thousands of live events with the best leagues and the biggest tournaments in the world, exclusive originals, the complete 30 for 30 library, premium articles and fantasy tools, and much more with ESPN Plus. Sign up now at espnplus.com/DFO. And Frank, the reason I want to mention that is because we mentioned all the out-of-town market games you can watch. Some games for me that I think fans will want to watch. We talked about Lucas Raymond. How about Lucas Raymond and Bertuzzi? You're going to have 3 of the top 5 NHL scorers going at it tomorrow night in Detroit. McDavid and Draisaitl, Bertuzzi, and Raymond. Frank has the Winnipeg Jets, of course, St. Louis Blues. They're also on Wednesday night. Quickly, give me your thoughts, Frank, about Detroit got by Vegas last night. Mm-hmm. Now Vegas isn't the same, and Laurent Brossoit didn't have a great game. But what do you make of when the Oilers come to town? All of a sudden, the Oilers are a team that a lot of opposing fans want to see because of their top 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, no question. At one point, well, not at one point, for a long time. If you lived in the East, like that was a game that you sold your tickets to. You're like, I don't need to see the Oilers, a team that we barely see, that isn't very competitive. That's the team you were selling your tickets for. Now you're trying to buy as many as you can get to take your kid to see a player like Connor McDavid for the first time live and in person.
And another one later on in the week on Friday, a team we really haven't talked about, Frank, at all, but we should give props to Daryl Sutter and the Calgary Flames.
Yep.
Jacob Markstrom. Are you kidding me? They're playing the Leafs. Both teams are rolling right now on Friday. That's another game that I think people will want to watch. But quickly, give me your thoughts on.
So clear on Calgary. 22 goals against.
Yeah. Hey,
Lowest
Markstrom,
in the West by a pretty decent margin. The Blues are at 25. No other team aside from the Oilers is in the 20s. The Oilers are at 28. And the Flames have played one more game than both those teams.
They're
22
winning with
goals
defense.
Against in 11 games. That's 2.
Yeah.
You're going to win.
Markstrom's got 4 shutouts.
But that's exact. We all kind of were like, everyone likes to rip on Daryl Sutter. But he's been saying it forever. We're not trying to win games 5-4. They're trying to win 3-2. All they need to do is score 3. Pretty simple game at that point.
Well, yeah, like Markstrom, like early on, if you go for first 10 games, to me, it's now him and Freddie Anderson would be 1-2, but I just look at what Markstrom's doing in Calgary. Man, you got 4 shutouts. Like, it's ridiculous where almost every second game you're thinking the guy's getting a shutout. It's crazy.
Well, they needed him to bounce back in such a big way. He was so, with all the excitement heading into last year with him after the season that he had 2 years ago in Vancouver, everyone's like, oh man, this is our guy. We're paying big money to get him. And he was just so average last year, 904. I mean, he keeps playing like this. This is a Vezina season.
Frank, lots of teams we didn't really get to Florida or Carolina. We'll touch on them on Friday. Of course, Florida stops Carolina from tying the NHL record for 10 consecutive wins to start the regular season. But here's the thing. Florida's off to their best start in franchise history. Carolina's off to their best start in franchise history. The Edmonton Oilers have never won 9 of 10 games, even with Gretzky and Messier and Coffey and all those guys who were in town for Kevin Lowe's jersey retirement. They're off to their best start. You mentioned the Blues, but there's some teams that are red hot, and I'm curious to see how they're going to continue or which other ones flip. Toronto seems to have found their way a little bit. Calgary's great. You mentioned the Anaheim Ducks have really surprised people, and the Philadelphia Flyers, to me, Frank, quickly before we end, I want to ask you about the team that you're in the city. What's your analysis of the Flyers? The only team that's beaten the Edmonton Oilers this season. They've looked really good some games, and then others kind of what have you. So what do you make of the Flyers?
Yeah, I think even the Flyers themselves, if we're being honest, they're still trying to figure out what to make of the Flyers, because they have had those nights where you're like, man, holy smokes, like this team could be something. And then they've had a few other ones where you're like, not so much. But I look at a game like Saturday night against Washington, just no fluff to it. It was just pure hard hat on, workman-like hockey, grind out a road win. And against a good team like Washington, it's another strong sign for Philly that, that they might have something. I think a lot of people were unsure where to put the Flyers. Are they second or third in the Metro, or are they 6th or 7th? And it varied everywhere between, because so much of it, I think, also depended on Carter Hart and the type of season that he would have. Martin Jones gets the win the other night. Jones has been way better. You said that he would be better. I wasn't sure. And Hart has been way more consistent this season to start.
Frank, good stuff, man. We will talk to you on Friday. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Saravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode. Delivered by DoorDash.